And we've begun with e4. So I've got an 800 rated opponent, and I'm going to respond with the Sicilian defense. Now, the Sicilian is black's most popular way of meeting e4. The idea of this is that it puts pressure on the center indirectly. Rather than advancing one of the two central pawns, the pawn on c5 guards the d4 square. So if white plays d4, this pawn stands ready to capture it. Now white has developed with bishop to c4, and I'm just going to continue here with d6. Now it might seem a bit unnatural to play this move before playing a piece out, knight to f6. That would seem a bit more natural, but if you play knight to f6, then white can play e5, and that gets a little bit uncomfortable. So d6 first makes e5 harder to achieve. So now I can play knight to f6, and my plan from here is going to be pretty simple. It's just going to be e6, bishop e7, castle kingside, and just completing development, really. You can't do anything too outrageous in the opening, even though there's a huge gap in rating between my opponent and myself. I'm still playing this the same way that I'd be playing against an opponent of my own level. Now this move is already a sign, though, of this player's rating level. Now 800, we can still call this the beginner level of chess, and this is what one of the types of moves that a beginner makes, moving the same piece twice in the opening. So white played bishop to c4, and then just a few moves later played bishop to b5. So that bishop has moved twice in the opening. If he wanted to give that check, he could have done it earlier. So now I'm going to get to block with bishop to d7, and white's got a choice to make. If he chooses to capture, then he would have used a piece which has moved twice to capture a piece which had only moved once, which would have been a gain of time. After this move, though, he's trying to bring the knight to a more active square. But this is known to be a mistake, because white actually needs this pawn on e4. It provides him with some good central space, and even though this knight's going to get to e5, from where it looks strong, the loss of the e4 pawn is not to white's advantage. So I'm just going to keep developing here, or am I? Let's see. He does have the possibility now of capturing with the knight, which would eliminate the bishop. And then he'd have the bishop pair. I could provoke the bishop trade, in which case we might get a few trades, and then I feel as though my position would be better, because these are white's two active pieces here, the two most active pieces. If he goes and trades them off for two pieces which are not doing very much, well then that's a win for me, a small win. In the opening phase of the game, it's all about these small wins. You don't often get the chance to find a move which wins on the spot. Those types of opportunities come later. In the opening, it's all about tiny incremental wins to try and make your position a bit better and to make your opponent's position a bit worse. Now, if you're looking to improve your chess, I help ambitious adults at the below 2000 ELO level improve their results in the game. So if you'd like to explore working together, click the link in the description below. It's the pinned comment or at the top of the description, and we can see if working together will be a good fit for both of us. And it's really these small wins, like I was talking about before, which are the difference between a rating like mine, 2100, not to be modest, but that's a good rating, and 800, where they're still learning about the game, still trying to find their way. So these kinds of opening principles are really helpful if you're looking to improve. So we do have a choice here. White could hold the tension or could initiate the trade. It's hard to keep the tension though. I mean, he could try d4, I suppose, but in that case I'm ready to capture. That's the whole point of having the pawn on c5. No, he does initiate the trade. Now I can recapture with the queen, and if we compare this position to the position that we had back here, white has lost these two active pieces, whereas I've lost these two passive pieces. And I've also been able to improve the queen off its starting square in the meantime. So this position is very good for me. Okay, we get queen to f3. Now what is the idea behind this move? Well, it does control this diagonal, but at the moment all of the squares on that diagonal are controlled by me. So I'm just going to continue with my plan. The question is whether I want to be a bit more aggressive here. You would normally bring the bishop to e7, but now that I've got some kind of activity advantage, it's quite tempting to bring it to d6 instead. Just have to be a little bit careful of knight to e4, but I've got that square covered, and I've also got the b5 square covered. So here I'm just thinking, if I bring the bishop out, can it get hit with a tempo from white? It can't, so I'm going to go ahead and bring it to d6. Now, white might try and bring the bishop out and attack this knight, but in that case I can just move it away because the queen is no longer on d8. If the queen was back on d8, then bishop here would create a pin. I'm actually half expecting this to happen now. I think there's quite a good chance that if I castle, we'll get bishop to g5. And then after that, well, after that I could even bring the bishop to e5, potentially. That would guard the knight. So I'm expecting bishop to g5 here. Bishop to e5 in case of bishop to g5 is one idea. I don't really want to move the knight away because bishop to g5, let's say here, well, that would lose a pawn for a start. Unless white looks to castle, that's another possibility that we could see here. I mean, this position is equal-ish, but I definitely prefer my own position. I've castled. My pieces are all off their starting squares. The rooks are connected. And I've got some ideas to expand on the queen side. This is going to be my main idea. Alright, this is the move that I thought we might see. And my plan in this case was to play bishop to e5. Bishop to e5, why not? This also has some idea of taking the knight. I mean, that is possible. I could do that, doubling the white pawns on c3. Although those pawns on c3 wouldn't be so easy to take advantage of. I mean, for his rating, my opponent is playing well so far. Although I'm not so sure about this move. Just as I say that, put the curse on him. Yeah, okay, castling queenside. For some reason that just screams out that it must be wrong. Now, that could be because the capture here becomes even more tempting. Also because these pawns are well advanced now. So there's a few lines that I'd like to calculate. Let's start with bishop takes knight, since that's the most forcing. Well, he's got to take back. And then queen in here looks very menacing. Or maybe knight here, threatening to take the pawn. Seems like there's a lot of threats coming in already. So bishop here, pawn here, and what's my next move? Well, if I played knight here, then that attacks the pawn, which would seem to provoke a response. Maybe he'd go forward, in which case I could jump in with an attack against the rook. The queen can also come out here. I just have to be a little bit concerned about white's own attacking prospects. So does white, for example, have some thoughts of using the queen and the bishop to cause me problems? Well, not just yet. I think my attack lands first. So I'm going to go for this. So this causes some damage around the white king, which is already in a compromised position, given that he's gone in castle queenside. And it's going to enable me to continue attacking with threats. Those threats are going to involve knight to d5, which is going to attack the pawn on c3, and also queen into a4, or maybe into b5, depending on what white does. So again, notice that I'm able to move this knight thanks to the fact that my queen has moved off the d8 square. This is another consequence of all these captures that we saw earlier. And back to the live position, I said before that it's bad that white traded off his pawn on e4. And we can see that already, right? If there was a pawn on e4, then the knight wouldn't have been able to come into d5. Okay, so white is now playing king to d2, arguing that perhaps the king is safe on the d file. Well, it's hard to believe that, isn't it? I just don't think that that could possibly be true. Let's see, if we go here, he probably closes the file. Then I can try and open it again. There's also queen coming in here, attacking this pawn. Although this pawn on a2 is kind of irrelevant. When you've got the enemy king in the center like this, the last thing you should be concerning yourself with is grabbing pawns on the edge of the board. Instead, you should be looking to create threats, and we can do that straight away via c4. Now, this is going to provoke a capture, I guess, and then I'll have a discovered check. Now, to be honest, I haven't even calculated this very much. I just assume that this must be very good for me. And, maybe that's a rather lazy way to play, but sometimes instincts can be very good. So let's say he takes. Well, I'm not worried about the material, first of all, because I'm just simply I'm simply going to be able to regain that pawn. Tripled pawns, if he captured here, those tripled pawns would not be something that white would be able to hold on to in the long term. What I'm really looking to do is open up lines. Now, he might take here, and it might even be the best move, but it just looks to open lines towards the exposed white king. I think castling queenside was a big mistake. Not the sort of mistake that you would likely see at higher levels, but I can understand that my opponent wants to be aggressive, wants to play dynamically, but sometimes when you play dynamically, the dynamics can work against you. Back to the live position now. So he's contemplating, I think, whether he can take the pawn. Well, let's say that he does. If he does take the pawn, what happens? I don't really have a very powerful discovered check here. No, instead he looks to close, which is quite understandable. It's probably what I would have done too. I'd love to bring a rook over to d8, but for the moment the bishop is guarding that square. I can also look to open things up this way, or try and get the queen over to attack this pawn, but actually the white queen is defending the pawn as well now, so it doesn't quite work so well. b5 and b4 looks like a way to soften up white's position a little bit more. This knight's very strong. It's actually on an outpost here, because it can never be attacked by a white pawn. Well, not for the moment anyway. It could eventually be attacked by a white pawn if white was ever able to get rid of this black pawn on c4 and then advance. But for all intents and purposes, d5 is an outpost for this knight. Very strong here. So how to keep creating threats? That's the real question. I think actually attacking this way makes some sense. Because I'd like to play here and capture this pawn, or if he captures this way, then I could take with the knight, or at least consider taking with the knight, softening up the lines towards the white king. Now what about white? What about white's plans? Well, I think white is going to try and use the queen and the bishop to cause some trouble around my king. So I could imagine a plan such as queen to g3 followed by bishop to h6. That would threaten checkmate, and it would provoke me into playing g6. That's probably what I would do if I were white in this position. So I would need to be ready to meet that plan with the rook already off f8, because if we just take a look at that, queen to g3, bishop to h6, if I played g6, then the rook on f8 would be able to be captured by white's bishop. So he's trying to prevent me from playing b4, but now I just renew the threat. Simple chess. When your opponent tries to stop the move that you're trying to make, you must insist. You must try again. So we've got rook to b1, attempting to still keep hold of the b4 advance. Can I play it anyway? Let's see, does that work as a pawn sacrifice? Maybe not quite. So in that case, I'll just bring the rook here and again renew the threat of b4. b4 is the move that I want to play, and I'm not going to let white deny me of it. So there's an interesting move. It's an interesting idea. Now he's offering to trade bishops, and could I even consider doing that? Let's see, if I take here, then I'm not really able to play this advance, or am I? Not really, no. So let's just put this rook on a light square. I always can take this bishop if I need to, but I don't need to be in a hurry to do so. It stays on this square. I've always got the option of this. But rather than do it straight away, I'd like to wait for the right moment. So I've still got the threat here of playing b4, and it's tough to see how white's going to stop that. Now another thing that's just happened by white moving the rook from d1 to b1 is that this file is no longer occupied with a white rook on the same line as my queen. It was a little bit uncomfortable having the rook on d1 with my own queen on d7, but now that this rook's moved away, I can breathe a little easier and just go for my main plan, which is b4. Now white's looking for a way to stop that, but I don't think he really can. Instead, I think white should be looking for counterplay. White should be looking for counterplay such as bishop to e5 and queen to g4 to create a threat of checkmate on g7. And then maybe white could follow that up after I play g6 with h4, h5. That's the way that I think white should be looking to play this. White's playing quite defensively, quite passively, and this is the wrong way to play. You want to be causing your opponent threats, and I feel like white in this game has been a bit reactive. Another plan I could go for is f6 followed by e5. That'd be another way of trying to break through in the center, but also open up the rook on the f file. It is always dangerous and worth double checking before moving one of the pawns in front of your own king, but also you sometimes do need to do it in order to open attacking lines. So here comes h4. I think this is just too slow though, so I'm going to simply continue with the plan of bringing this pawn up. Notice also that the rook on b7 is defended by the queen. So I am able to take in some circumstances. It's not relevant now, but like a couple of moves ago, like if we had this tension here and if it was black to move, then I would have been able to capture here because the rook is defended by the queen. So little details like this do matter. You try not to have any piece undefended. It's one good rule of thumb, because it's harder to blunder that way. Now, if I take with the rook, then there'll be a capture probably, and my knight gets to b4. Now, is that good for me? I think it could be, actually. Because then I could follow up with queen to a4, and there'd be some pressure on c2 that way. Another possibility is advancing here first. It's also quite interesting, because that would prevent white from supporting this pawn with another pawn. So with this check, we're going to get the white king to move. It's still defended by the knight. And at the end, what I'm looking to do is capture this pawn on d4. So let's picture the line, for example, rook takes, knight takes, and then this pawn will be undefended. I also would still have the possibility there of bringing the queen into a4. But I feel like my threats are really starting to make life very uncomfortable for white here. I mean, for a start, where does he move the king? If he moves the king to the back rank, then this rook would actually be hanging, and I might be able to take complete control over the queenside ranks by bringing the queen in here, for instance. But what he's done is go with king to d1. So let's capture here. There's some idea here that he might look to capture here with the queen, which is what he does. Now, is there a strong follow-up here? There's obviously this move, which would fork the bishop and the queen. Although white has a pawn up here, I've just noticed. So I do need to be a little bit careful. There's a trap I could set here. The trap is rook here, but if he takes here and I give this check, which was my idea, he moves out of the way and I take, then there might actually be a back rank mate, right? So just watch out for that stuff. Maybe the thing to do is to just reinforce the knight directly. Something like this. But he's got this move. He's got this move, but fortunately I've got knight to d5 in that case, which wins the tempo back. You always got to be watching out for the forcing moves from your opponent. Now, one thing here is that there's pressure now on c2. So the white queen needs to stay on that square. If we do get bishop to d6, which is a forcing move that I should have considered, but didn't really consider enough, Then I've got the move knight to d5 or knight to a2. Either way, that wins a tempo against the white queen and therefore saves the material. If that didn't exist, then I could actually have been in quite some trouble there. So he's going and trying to bring the rook out this way. This is his plan. So I'm going to just look to keep creating threats. He needs to defend the bishop, this is the thing, and maybe I'm going to be able to grab this pawn. That looks quite likely, actually. So white is going to need to play the queen over to either f3 or to g3, otherwise the bishop is just lost. And then I'm going to be able to capture this pawn right here, which is a very important pawn. Very important pawn for many reasons, because it gives a check to the white king, and it also introduces the queen into a square which would be attacking the bishop. So I think there's a good chance that I'm actually going to win a piece here. Let's take a look. Queen to f3, for instance. Well, then I come in with check, and once the white king moves somewhere, then there'll be two attackers on this bishop. The knight, which is already attacking it, and also the queen. So it's amazing that just by playing active forcing moves, you can find tactics which you never really planned for. Good piece coordination, like getting the knight on a good central square. I mean, look how many squares this knight controls. It's what they call an octopus, because it's got 8 arms to it. A lot of influence. Now, this is the point. The point is that I can capture here with check, and then there's going to be an extra attacker on this bishop. This is going to win me a piece, and with it should be the game. See that? There's 2 pieces attacking that bishop now, and because it's a check, white doesn't have time to add another defender to it. He's got to move the king somewhere, although I guess he could block, but either way, this bishop is a goner. Either queen takes or knight takes. Both look pretty good. Just depends on what white does. So what looks quite tempting here is actually to take with the knight, because that comes with a threat. The threat is a royal fork of the king and queen. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I'll be continuing this series where I take on opponents of different rating levels all the way up to 2000, and I'll be showing you how you can win at every rating level. So stay tuned. Now, unfortunately for my opponent, he's fallen for the trap. He's just allowed this fork, so I'm going to go for it. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to not win the queen. I'm going to win the rook here. Because, well, if I take the queen, then I lose my own queen. So I'd rather gain a rook for free than trade off a queen each. So let's just grab that one. And there we go. We get the resignation. Now that you've seen how to win against an 800 rated opponent, click here to see the next video in the series. I'll be taking on opponents at all rating levels from 0 to 2000 and showing you how you can win at every level.